Massachusetts, speaking with us here on Balance of Power late yesterday. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington as we bring in Nathan Dean, senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, who's done a lot of reporting around the CFPB freeze. Nathan, it's good to see you. Elizabeth Warren talked to Jay Powell about this in his first day of testimony yesterday and challenged him to name any other federal agency that would act as a cop on the beat. He agreed with her. There was not. That seems to be essentially the message that she's delivering. Did she just frame Democrats' arguments against the Trump administration effectively?
Yeah, I think it's important to also look back from the market perspective here, that if you're a company that's regulated by the CFPB, that is correct. You're not going to have any examiners coming in and looking at you while they're effectively frozen. But the regulation still remains on the books. And so a future CFPB, and just remember, yesterday, President Trump nominated Jonathan McKiernan from the FDIC to be the next director of the CFPB. They can turn those examiners back on. A future CFPB could come back and say to these companies, yes, while the regulations are still in the book, yeah, nobody examined you, but you could be at enforcement risk here. So I don't think you're going to see much behavior in the way of the private sector at the moment, because it's a real risk that if you just were to wake up tomorrow and decide, I'm not going to listen to the CFPB regulations because the examiners aren't working.
Well, so when we consider the examinations being done and the fact that you have to communicate to Bloomberg terminal clients in Wall Street about what realistically is happening here, what does this signal about the wider financial regulatory environment, having just listened to the concerns of Senator Warren about where this could go from here?
Yeah, so I think what we're telling our clients are really two things. One is deregulation takes time. There's really no magic wand where you can just wave it and say deregulate and it happens immediately. It's certainly in the bank regulation with Jerome Powell and the future Fed vice chair of supervision. That's going to take years to fully implement. The other thing is that just keep in mind, other regulators may step up. In case of the CFPB, it could be the states. So if you're a payday lender or a debt collector and you decide to ignore CFPB regulations while they're still in the books, that's nothing to say that the Attorney General of California can't step in and say, look, if you want to play in the state of California, you have to follow these rules. If you don't, get out. So what we're telling our clients at the moment is when it comes to the CFPB in particular and also financial regulation, deregulation is coming. It's a slow process. I mean, most likely a lot of this is going to be 2027 at the earliest for you to see it hit the company's impacts. But also remember, regulation comes in other forms. And so it's not going to be this magic wand that completely frees up the industry.
I've got a headline that crossed the terminal from the White House press secretary while you're on with us here, Nathan. I'm guessing your phone's going to start ringing because clients are going to want to know this idea of reciprocal tariffs being implemented by the White House. The president had promised them yesterday or today. It appears they may come today, as the press secretary says they will precede the Modi visit, which is set for tomorrow. What will investors make of this, and what should they know?
So uncertainty is the new certainty when it comes to the Trump administration, especially when it comes to these tariffs. And so, the market, I think, was anticipating, look, when President Trump said reciprocal tariffs were coming, he certainly meant it. But the question I have, and what we're going to be looking to see, is what type of negotiation does President Trump want to take place with these reciprocal tariffs? If it is just a true, you're paying us 30, you're charging us 30%, we're going to charge you 30% until we get down to zero. That's one thing for the market, and I don't think the market's going to like that. But if President Trump has other issues, say with the European Union, and there's a negotiation that could take place, these tariffs could be short term. So I hate to say that we just don't know yet, but we're going to be really looking at President Trump's comments in his Truth Social posts over the next 24 to 48 hours to see if there's little nuggets that other countries can do to potentially pull back those tariffs, similar to what we saw with Canada, Mexico, and Colombia.
Well, and Nathan, how much will the tariffs ultimately matter to the markets if we do indeed get all of the tax cuts that the president is promising? Does one override the other?
Well, and that's the big challenge when it comes to these tax cuts, because obviously the House Budget Committee just released their budget resolution, which called for 4.5 trillion in tax cuts this year. When you have Elon Musk going around saying, look, he wants to, cut money from the government to end up, try and get us deficit neutral again, 4.5 trillion adding to the deficit is going to be very challenging. And this is probably the number one question we get from folks in New York and in London is, when are U.S. lawmakers going to get serious about the deficit? And our response to them is, look, economic growth and tariffs are certainly going to get you there, but it's the Senate parliamentarian, and it's also just the Republicans needing to get to 218 votes to pass this in the House. And you have a lot of Republicans out there saying we don't want to add to the deficit. So for the investors that we talk to, what we are telling them is this is a long process. We don't anticipate any type of tax reconciliation bill passing in the first half of this year. And we'll see going forward how much tariffs actually have an impact, because tariffs is what's happening today. Tax reform is going to be happening later this year, and we'll get a better idea of how mathematically they compose or work together as we get closer to the Republicans coming up to their finale of passing this reconciliation bill.
Yep, the negotiations have only just begun. Nathan Dean of Bloomberg Intelligence, thank you very much indeed. And as we talk about the negotiations,